I gave birth, and my husband went silent. The second he saw the baby. He said it looked exactly like his boss. Then he called a lawyer. I need you to understand that I have spent 9 years identifying the points where things could go wrong before they become visible. That is the job. I write reports that name risk before it becomes a document someone else writes. I am good at it, and I have been good at it for long enough that I believed, for longer than I should have, that I could read a situation and manage it. The baby was born at 4:17 in the morning on a Thursday in March. When Joel held him and went quiet, I watched his face do something I had not seen it do in 6 years, and in the space of 11 minutes, I counted them from the clock on the delivery room wall. I understood that the version I had been running was about to stop being the only one in the room. My name is Harriet Voss. I am 37 years old, and I am a compliance officer at an asset management firm in the city where my job is to find the gaps between what should happen and what is happening before anyone else finds them. I read regulation. I read behavior. I read the distance between what people say and what the records show. I am, by the assessment of 3 partners and 2 annual reviews, exactly the kind of person a firm needs when it wants to see where the problems are before they arrive. I need you to understand that I am telling you this not because it makes what happened better, but because it is the only honest way to describe why I believed, for as long as I believed it, that I was in control. Joel and I had been married for 3 years when I got pregnant. 6 years together in total, which started at a 2-day risk management conference in Birmingham, where we had been seated at the same dinner table, and he had made me laugh on the first evening, and I had thought, this is someone I can talk to. He called 3 days after the conference. We went for dinner in a pub near his office. That was the beginning. What was real? And I want to be precise about this. Joel made tea in the mornings. Every morning before I was awake, strong and without milk, which is exactly how I liked it, and which he had remembered since the second week we were together without ever mentioning that he remembered. I have thought about the tea many times since March, not sentimentally, as a data point about what he was and about what I had. He was a project manager at a technology consultancy, which meant he was patient and methodical and finished what he started. Those were his qualities. 3 years into the marriage, I understood his specific flaw, which I want to be honest about. He measured his worth by the regard of people above him. And for the 4 years he had been working under Marcus Chen, the director of his department, Marcus had been that person. Joel talked about Marcus the way careful people talk about an exacting parent, aware at all times of what he was thinking, always building the case for approval. The promotion review was in September. Joel had been preparing for it since January. I had met Marcus Chen at company dinners over 4 years. Joel brought me because he wanted Marcus to see his home life as stable. I understood the performance. I had managed people's presentations of themselves for years, and I recognized what he was doing. Marcus was 44, department director, well-dressed and specific in his attention, in a way that made everyone he spoke to feel like the conversation was the most interesting one he was having. I had noted that quality and filed it correctly the first 3 times. The 12-week scan was on the refrigerator. Joel had put it there the same afternoon we came home from the appointment, found the corner under the notepad magnet, smoothed it flat, and that was where it lived. Just the grey image, the comma-shaped outline, ordinary in the way those things are ordinary once they have been on the fridge for 6 weeks. I need you to understand the autumn that preceded everything, not the pregnancy, which was medically unremarkable. The autumn was difficult in the way that is difficult to describe without sounding like a complaint. Joel had 3 major project deadlines between September and November and an end-of-year review to prepare for, which meant late evenings and weekend calls and a particular quality of presence that was not quite presence. We were in the same rooms. He was not quite there. By November, I had not said anything about my own work to him in several weeks, and he had not asked. And I want to be precise. I am not describing a monster. I am describing a man under pressure who had stopped noticing me. At the company Christmas party in December, I was 28 weeks pregnant, and I had been invisible in my own life for approximately 3 months. Marcus Chen talked to me for 25 minutes about a regulatory change I had mentioned at a dinner the previous April. He had read the relevant paper. He wanted to know what I thought. I need you to understand what that felt like, to be asked a specific question about your own work by a person who had remembered something you said 8 months ago, after 3 months of making dinner in a quiet house. Joel's sister Diane was at the party. She was 35, and we had the kind of relationship built from years of proximity rather than closeness. I saw her look across the room once toward where Marcus and I were standing. She had a specific expression that I read as nothing in particular. On the drive home, Joel asked what we had been talking about. I said the regulatory paper. He said he hadn't known we had a connection around that topic. He said Marcus was good at remembering things. He said it with something that sounded like pride in his employer's qualities, and that detail has stayed with me too. 2 weeks later, Joel worked through the weekend of our anniversary. He had warned me. He apologized. He said it was the last push before the review cycle closed. I sat in the kitchen with tea I had made myself and thought about being seen. Priya was my closest colleague, the person I had lunch with most days. She had been married for 6 years to a man she described as fine, and she had a way of finding other people's complications more interesting than her own life, which I had always understood, and which I am being honest about now. She had noticed something at the Christmas party, not the conversation itself, but the quality of how I had looked during it. She told me later, when the conversation was no longer the last thing to have happened. She said she had not seen me look that alive in months. She was not wrong. The coffee was in January, 7 weeks after the Christmas party. Marcus sent a message through the company's professional system asking whether I was free to discuss a compliance matter for a new fund his firm was launching. My firm had done compliance work for his company before. The reason was real and legitimate, which is true. I need you to understand that I identified the reason as real and legitimate, and also understood, from the way I chose what to wear that morning, that I was not going for the compliance question. We met 2 streets from his office, not near mine. 40 minutes on the compliance question, which was genuine, and then another hour on other things. He asked about the pregnancy. He asked whether I was finding it isolating, which was the specific word, and I said I was finding it quieter than I expected. He said that was a kind way to say it. 3 things happened in the next 2 weeks. First, I told Joel that evening I had met a colleague for a working coffee, which was true in the sense that I had worked, and I let him understand it was someone from my own firm, which was the omission. He said that sounded good and asked if I was hungry. He made dinner. Second, I told Priya, I need you to understand why. I needed the information to exist somewhere outside my own head, where it had been pressurizing for 3 weeks. Priya received it the way she received anything that had edge and weight, with specific questions that were not concerned questions but invitation questions. She asked whether I understood what I was doing. I said I did. She said she wasn't going to tell me to stop. I had not asked her to. Third, I booked a storage unit. I want to be precise about this because my solicitor found it on the joint bank statement in April and asked about it. The unit held 6 months of a life I did not bring into the family home. That was the compliance officer's approach. Contain the variables, keep the systems separate, manage the documentation. I was 30 weeks pregnant, and I was managing this the way I managed regulatory risk, which is true. And I want to be clear that I knew, while doing it, that the analogy did not hold. Joel had been preparing his promotion case in the way he prepared everything, patiently, in increments, with the structure organized around one person's opinion. He mentioned Marcus obliquely in most of his evenings, something Marcus had said at the all-hands, something Marcus had forwarded, an alignment Marcus had noted in the last review meeting. He was building something, and I was the stable background detail of his building. In February, he asked me whether I thought he had a chance at the promotion. Not as a question that needed an answer, he had worked it through already, but as something he needed to say to a person who would receive it without judgment. I said I thought he had a very good chance. He said Marcus had been supportive. He said he thought they were aligned. I said that was good. He looked at me for a moment and asked whether I was all right. I said I was tired from work. He nodded and went back to what he had been reading. I need you to understand that was the moment. He had the question, and let the surface answer be enough. That was his flaw, and it is a real one. He had organized me into the stable portion of his life so thoroughly that he had stopped checking whether the stable portion was intact. Not because he didn't care, because he was building something and assumed I was fine. He was not a monster. He had stopped noticing me. 2 months, 3 times meeting my husband's manager. One evening at a client reception where Marcus and I were both present and spent 40 minutes across the room from each other without approaching, which was its own kind of intimacy. Sasha, who had been my closest friend from university, came for lunch in late February. 15 years she had known me. She asked how I was finding the 3rd trimester. I said it was fine. She asked about Joel. I said he was very focused. She had looked at me with the almost question she had been carrying since at least December, and I had not offered anything, and she had accepted fine, which she was always better at accepting than I deserved. She was protecting herself as much as me. I knew that, and I used it. Diane called Joel the last week of February. I heard 4 minutes of his side of the conversation from the other room, and afterward he said she wanted to know whether to book time off around the due date. He said it in the ordinary voice. I said of course. He sent her the date. I did not ask what else they had talked about. The labour started at 11 on a Wednesday night. Joel was there through all of it, present, steady, holding my hand in the specific careful way he held things that required attention. The delivery room at 2 in the morning has a quality I want to describe precisely. Harsh light, and the particular sounds of a hospital corridor at that hour, and the sense of time moving at a different rate from the rest of the world. At 6 that evening, before the contractions had become regular, I had sent Marcus a message through the personal channel saying I was going to hospital. I need you to understand why. I had told him the due date, and not telling him felt like a larger lie than telling him. He replied in 10 minutes. He said he hoped everything went smoothly. 8 words. Correct, and professional, and complete. I read those 8 words standing in the kitchen doorway with my hospital bag, and Joel was carrying the second bag to the car, and I put my phone away and went. The baby was born at 4:17. He was small and correct, and the midwife handed him to Joel first, which we had asked for. Joel took him with both hands, the deliberate hold of a careful person, like he understood the structural requirements. He looked at the baby's face. Diane was in the room. Joel had asked whether she could be there, and I had said of course. I need you to understand what I saw, and to be precise about it. Joel looked at the baby's face, the dark eyes, the dark hair, the olive skin that was not mine and was not his. And his face did something I had no word for. Not shock. A stillness that was different from the stillness of attention. Something behind his face closed. He held the baby for 4 minutes after that. I counted them from the clock. He held him and said he was beautiful, which was true, and said it in a voice that had nothing wrong in it. Then he put him back in my arms. Then he stepped to the window. He stood at the window for 11 minutes. He did not leave the room. He stood with his back to us and looked out at the car park in the early morning dark. The midwife handed me the baby and looked once at Joel and then at me. Diane came to my side and looked at the baby and said he was perfect. She used the voice of a person who was being very careful about what came after perfect. I need you to understand what I was doing in those 11 minutes while I held the baby. I was calculating. I was looking at his face and looking at Joel's back and running the exposure scenarios in the way I run compliance assessments, the variables, the documentation, the range of outcomes from each version of what happened next. I was 37 years old with a newborn, and I was running scenarios. The 12-week scan was in my phone, in my photos. I had looked at it the previous morning in a waiting room. In the delivery room at 4:30, it felt like it belonged to a different version of what was happening. Not the scan itself, the version of ourselves who had put it on the refrigerator. When Joel went to find coffee and Diane and I were briefly alone, she did not say anything directly. She tidied the small table beside my bed with careful movements. She said the baby had interesting colouring. I said babies often changed by 6 weeks. She said yes, probably. She put a water cup down and picked it back up. That was the conversation. 4 sentences, none of them about what they were about. On the drive home 3 days later, me and Joel and the baby in the car seat, and the particular quality of the world outside a hospital when you are leaving with something you did not have before, Joel said he needed to ask me something when we were settled. Not then. Later. I said of course. He said it quietly. He was watching the road. I counted 7 minutes between that sentence and our driveway. I need you to understand the first week home with a baby. There is almost no sleep, and what sleep there is does not feel like rest, and in every fragment of quiet, I was running the same assessment. Joel was functioning. More than functioning. He was practically present in a way that he had not been during the pregnancy. Feeding schedules, nappy changes, the methodical competence of a man who manages complex projects and applies that competence to whatever is in front of him. He was useful. He was not with me. He had not asked his question yet. Gwen, his mother, came on the 4th day with food and the specific energy of someone who wants to be helpful and knows how. She held the baby and said he was healthy and strong. She looked once at me and once at Joel, and her warmth stayed in the room without quite reaching me. I had the thought that she had spoken to Diane. Diane came herself on the 6th day. She sat with me in the living room while Joel was upstairs, and she told me what she had seen. She said it without drama. She had been at the Christmas party, and she had seen Marcus and me talking, and she had seen something in how we were positioned. Not what we said, just how we stood, that she had not been able to dismiss, and she had chosen not to say anything at the time because she had not wanted to fracture something based on what might have been nothing. She said she was telling me now because she had been in the delivery room. I asked what she thought she had seen at the party. She said she had seen the way a person stands when they are not standing with a colleague. She was specific and quiet, and she was not performing anything. She said she was not there to make decisions for me or Joel. She said she thought I should know that she had seen it and had kept it. She left after another 20 minutes without saying whether she had already told Joel. I need you to understand what happened that evening. Joel had gone to get nappies and I was alone with the baby in the living room, and it was quiet in the way that a house is quiet when the particular absence in it is the absence of someone who used to fill it. I was holding the baby. He was awake, looking at the space above my shoulder. I looked at his face, the dark eyes, the colouring that was not mine, the new person who had not asked to be born into the middle of what I had made. And the thought arrived very clearly. This child is going to spend his whole life in the middle of what I made. Not Joel. Not the marriage. The baby. The door was open for long enough that I felt what was on the other side of it. Then I thought, I need to understand exactly what Joel has worked out. I thought, Priya will know how to think through this. I picked up my phone. Priya answered and I told her about the delivery room and Diane's visit. She said this was complicated. She said she was thinking of me. She said to hang in there and we would talk properly when I had slept. It was the most careful thing she had ever said to me, and by the end of the week her messages were taking 3 hours where they had taken 10 minutes. Joel came home with the nappies. He put them away. He asked if I had eaten. He made dinner. His silent decision marker came 2 days after that. I identified it as what it was and chose to read it as something else, which is true. He went through the kitchen drawer where we kept shared documents, insurance, the old tenancy agreement, car paperwork, and he removed a folder and took it to the desk in the spare room. He did not explain. I asked if he needed anything. He said he was just organizing. I saw the marriage certificate from the doorway. He did not close the folder. I told myself he was a person who organized under pressure. Which was true. Which was not the only explanation. Sasha came at the end of the second week to meet the baby. She held him and said the right things and looked at me several times with the almost question, and I did not offer anything and she did not ask. She had always been better at accepting fine than I deserved. 3 weeks after the birth, on an evening after the baby had gone down, Joel made tea and put mine on the table in front of me without saying anything about it, and sat across from me and said there was something he had been putting off asking. I sat with the tea. He said the baby had the features of a person he knew, and that person was not someone whose features he expected to see in his child, and that he had been going back and forth about how to ask the next question for 20 days, and he was not willing to wait any longer. He said all of it in the project briefing voice, neutral, specific, complete. I said I needed him to understand that the situation was complicated. He said he understood that. He asked me to tell him what happened. I need you to understand that I did not plan what came out of my mouth. I was exhausted, and it was late, and Joel had put the tea in front of me the same way he had put it in front of me for 6 years. And somewhere in 3 weeks of running scenarios, I had run out of the version where I was still managing the narrative. I said Marcus's name. I said it was 3 months, several times, that it was over, and that I wanted him to have those facts in the right order so he was not building a wrong version. 1, 3 months, several times, over. Joel sat with this for 2 minutes. The kitchen clock, the baby monitor, quiet. He sat very still in the way he sat when he was reading a complex brief. Then he asked whether I understood that this person was his direct professional superior. Not angry. Checking a fact before proceeding. I said yes. He asked whether the baby was his. I said I did not know. I said it was possible. He looked at the table. Then I said the thing that was completely true. I said that he had spent the entire pregnancy organizing his case for promotion under the same man I had been seeing, that he had attended every work dinner and every team event and every weekend review session, and that I had spent 7 months at home with morning sickness, and no one who asked how I was, or what I was thinking about, or what was happening in my own work, and that I had been invisible in my own life for months, and Marcus had looked at me like I was worth looking at, and I had gone toward that because I was starving for it. Joel could not refute it. That is true. He had not been present in the way that mattered. He had organized me into the background and assumed the background was fine. His flaw had been real and sustained, and I had just named it accurately. He sat with it for some time. Then he said he was sorry for the things that were his to be sorry for. He said he accepted what I had named. He said it did not change what had happened. He said he was going to handle this properly. He picked up his phone and went to the other room and closed the door. The specific sound of that door, not a slam, a careful click, the sound of a person who needs the room to be smaller, is the thing I keep coming back to. There is no version of compliance reporting that prepares you for a door that closes that quietly. I called Priya. 4 rings and voicemail. I sat at the table with the cold tea and the baby monitor and my phone. I texted Marcus that night through the personal channel. I need you to understand the reason. I had said his name to Joel, which meant the situation had changed, and I wanted to inform him in an orderly way. That was the reason I told myself. I was a compliance officer managing a developing situation. I would notify the relevant parties. His reply came the next morning. 2 sentences. He said he had heard from Joel's assistant that Joel had taken emergency leave and he was concerned, and that he wanted me to know any further contact should go through the appropriate channels. Professional language. Complete. Closed. I read it 3 times. The language was the language of a man who had already spoken to a solicitor, which is true, which I identified immediately, because I know what that language looks like. Joel came back from the other room that evening and said he was going to stay at his parents' house for a week to give them both space. He had already packed a bag. He had also sent an email to the nursery we had booked for the following year, asking to be copied on all future correspondence. He mentioned this in passing. He said it was just for his records. I need you to understand why the nursery email was the thing I understood most clearly. Not the bag. Not the solicitor language from Marcus. The nursery. Because it was the action of a man who was not walking away but was preparing. And there is no version of managing a situation that survives a prepared person. Priya's message came 2 days later. She was sorry. Things were complicated. She was thinking of me. She did not call. I sent Sasha a message saying things had become difficult. She replied immediately. I said I needed to talk and she said she was free Thursday. Thursday I said not yet. Friday I said not yet. By Saturday she had stopped asking. Not unkindly. Just stopped. Gwen texted once to say the baby was all that mattered right now and that Joel was all right. She did not say she was thinking of me. The house was quiet in the evenings in a different way from the previous quiet. Before, the quiet had been a man in another room. This was the quiet of the absence of a man in another room. I sat with the baby and ran the calculations, and they did not produce a version that held. The document arrived 11 days after Joel left for his parents' house. Courier. My full name on the envelope. Inside, 2 items. The first was a petition for dissolution of marriage, filed at the family court, citing irretrievable breakdown. The second was an application for a DNA testing order, requesting a court-ordered paternity test. The test was scheduled for the 22nd of April at a registered clinic. The initial dissolution hearing was listed for the 15th of May at 10 in the morning. I held the letter at the kitchen table. I am a compliance officer. I know what documents are. I know what a courier envelope means in terms of the seriousness of a situation. I have spent 9 years writing reports about the point at which a risk becomes a matter of record, becomes something that can no longer be managed informally. I had not applied this framework to my own situation before that morning. I called my own solicitor from a property matter 4 years ago. She took the call and scheduled Tuesday and said to bring both documents. 48 hours between the letter and the appointment, during which I sat in the house with the baby and the baby monitor, and the 12-week scan still under the corner of the notepad magnet on the fridge. I tried Marcus once. His personal number redirected to a message listing his legal representative's contact details. The message said all communications should be directed there. I need you to understand what that message is. It is the sound of a person who was never at risk in the way I was, closing the one door he had left open. He had his own life, his own position, his own lawyer, and he had been managing those things the whole time. I had understood this in the part of me that reads situations accurately. I had not applied it. Priya's last message of any real substance was 11 days before the letter. 3 days after it arrived, I sent a message saying I had received legal documents and needed to talk. She replied 4 hours later. She was so sorry and it sounded really hard, and she was juggling a lot right now, but she was thinking of me. She did not call. That was the last thing of any real substance she sent. 5 things changed in the 6 weeks after the courier. Joel moved back into the house when the court scheduled the hearing. His solicitor's advice to establish continuing residence. He slept in the spare room. We communicated about the baby through notes left on the kitchen counter. He made tea every morning and left mine on the counter. Strong. No milk. Neither of us said anything about it. The joint accounts were reviewed as part of the dissolution process. The direct debit for the storage unit was visible on the statement. My solicitor asked about it, and I told her the truth. The unit held 6 months of things I had not been able to keep at home. The compliance officer's approach: contain the variables. The variables had been contained and then found. Sasha came in the 2nd week of April to see the baby. She was warm and careful, and she did not stay long. At the door, she said she hoped things got easier. She said it in the voice of someone who is being honest about not knowing what else to say. That was the last time I saw her for several months, which is true. and which I count now as one of the accurate costs. Marcus's solicitor sent a letter to mine. Mr. Chen was prepared to comply with the testing order and would engage through appropriate channels and had no further communication to make. He did not contest the order. He provided his sample on the scheduled date at the same clinic, separate appointment. The scheduling ensured we did not see each other. He had managed that outcome from the beginning. At the firm, my manager asked me into a meeting in late April. She said she had heard through a mutual professional contact that I was dealing with a family situation. She said the firm wanted to be supportive and that I could take additional leave. She said it warmly. She was also telling me that the situation had become known in the professional world that overlapped with Joel's, and that known is its own kind of permanent. The DNA results arrived the same week as the May hearing. The baby is Joel's. I need you to understand what that means and what it does not mean. It is the fact the whole story was moving toward, and it is correct, and I want to be precise. The results confirmed Joel as the biological father. He received them on the same day. He sat in the spare room for most of that evening and then came out and asked if he could hold the baby, and I said yes, and he took him to the chair in the baby's room and sat with him for an hour, and I did not go in. The DNA results did not change what I had told him. They did not produce the version where Marcus's solicitor had not sent a letter. They did not remove the dissolution petition from the court's records, or the storage unit from the bank statement, or the name I had said in the kitchen from the room where I had said it. I need you to understand what I believed was the protection. I had managed the information. I had kept the systems separate. I had contained the variables. I had run the scenarios. I had done everything that a person who reads situations accurately should do, and the system had still failed because the system was built on the assumption that I could see all the variables, and the variable I had not accounted for was the one that mattered, that I had been seen, and that being seen has its own consequences that do not comply with the management structure. The dissolution petition moved forward. The May hearing established a formal separation period. Joel remains in the house. I remain in the house. We are in the same rooms for different reasons. 2 mornings a week there is no tea on the counter because he leaves before 5 for a site visit, and on those mornings I make my own, and it is fine. I know how strong he makes it. I have always known. That is not a complicated thing to remember. Priya is not in my contacts in a meaningful way. The storage unit has been cleared. Marcus is a name in a legal file. What I was right about has not stopped being true. He was absent. He was building something, and I was the background detail. The 7 months of morning sickness and quiet evenings and dinners I made alone are not things I invented. They are real, and they were real, and I had a genuine complaint that a fair witness would hear. I keep thinking about what I learned from my mother, which I have never told anyone clearly. When I was 16, I found out my father had a daughter from another relationship, 4 years older than me, whom I had never heard of. My mother knew. She had known for years. She stayed. The lesson I drew was that lives could be managed in compartments, that the compartments did not have to touch, that love survived in separate rooms if the rooms were kept correctly. I applied that lesson. I was thorough. The rooms touched anyway. The scan is still on the refrigerator. Joel put it there the afternoon we came home from the 12-week appointment, and I have not taken it down. The baby is his. I had the affair. He has the documents. The tea is still the way I like it, on the mornings he makes it. That is not comfort. It is just what remains.